Welcome to Interview. Today, my guest is Genese Davis, writer of the game Omensight for Spearhead Games. How you doing today?
Wow, I'm doing so well. I thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk about Omensight because as one of the writers, I had such a good time with the team that when I got pinged, from you to do this, I was like immediately like, yes, anytime I can talk about Omensight and how much fun it was to work with fellow writers and designers, I am in. So thank you so much for having me.
Oh, of course. Thank you for being here. You're definitely probably my bigger guest so far,
Aw.
so this is a treat for me.
Yay, I'm so excited. Oh, this is gonna be so fun.
Real quick here, if you want to give the audience just a little background about yourself, as we said, you wrote the game Omensight, but you also do some other video game writing and have a book series.
Yeah, well, absolutely. It's crazy because there's always that joke like, oh, when you're young, you have to figure out what you're gonna do and find the right college and apply and get the right degree and find, the job. And I just think it's amazing how life can take you on these twists and turns because it absolutely did that for me. And I did not know as a young woman that I would become a professional writer. It was definitely not even in my grasp of something that could actually be. In fact, I started working. My first job was at 12 years old. I started working at a horse barn, and most people are like, "What? How did you do that?" And the key is I was homeschooled, so I was able to balance my schedule. And then I also went to private school after that. And then I went to public school, so I actually got a taste of all three types of schools, which was really cool. I really actually appreciate that my parents let me try them all. But what was so cool about like working at such a young age is that it taught me incredible work ethic, and I think that has really helped me in the writing realm, especially with recommendations and word of mouth and hitting deadlines, because I have a very disciplined mentality when it comes to work. And I really think that comes from having that discipline as a young person. So after I started working at 12, I never stopped. And I became a horseback riding instructor. After that, I became a banker. I almost went into the military and became a pilot.
Wow.
Right? I mean, I did I dabbled and I tried a bunch of different majors, and it was actually in college, and I have to give praise to all of the educators and professors and teachers out there that work with people in all these classes of all ages, because when I was in college, I remember one of my English professors telling me, "Hey, you have a knack for dialogue. You should explore that." And it was just that little seed of an idea that really encouraged me to even fathom, to even contemplate like writing and as something to pursue or something to look into. And long story short, I did end up, switching my major to English and committing to writing as a career. But what's crazy about that is I was already 5 years in to a banking career. I worked my way up from teller to manager. I was hiring, firing, interviewing, doing all the things that bankers do. So I always like to mention that because I think there are other people in the world that, were climbing the ladder of one career and something could happen, and it's super scary to think to yourself, do I want to jump to a different ladder and start from the beginning, right? And like climb down, so to speak, and switch and start climbing up a different path. But I think it's important to highlight that it can be done. And so if there's something in you, if there's a calling in you and something happens, or someone says something to you and it inspires you in some way, it absolutely can be done. It's difficult. It's very hard, but it can be done, if that makes sense. What's crazy is when I made that decision to change my major to English, I was also at the time I had never really grown up playing, hardcore video games, but I had played, just things with my brother like Donkey Kong or, Mario or whatever. But in college, actually, my roommates introduced me to this game called, as if people won't know it, but it's a very famous Final Fantasy, in particular, Final Fantasy 11. But to me, it was completely off my radar, right? I had not grown up around. This was my first foray into Final Fantasy, and I want to mention it because that game had such an influence in starting my writing career that it would be, it was silly of me not to.
Yeah, no, Final Fantasy 11 in particular is a game that I think a lot of people cite as something that really kind of woke them up to narrative progression. So it's not unusual that you were inspired by that
I'm
game.
so
So
glad you said that. I like want to high five you right now. Absolutely. After playing that game, after studying creative writing and really diving into writing, like I said in college, I started writing this book that that is bridging kind of the gap between gaming, gamers and non-gamers. And what's crazy is that this little book is actually what opened my writing career. And what happened is as I was writing it, I realized that it was kind of cathartic for me to write it, where I was really pouring in real life experiences, not only from gaming, but just from upbringing and things that we go through, all of us, right? Whether it's bullying at school or being underappreciated at work or having family pressure or drama. And I cannot believe that I decided like, hey, I just need to write this to kind of bridge to myself, like healing, but also what gaming when the video game industry has meant to me. Because at the time, I was actually really trying to heal from personal experience that had kind of brought my life to a halt, where I survived some trauma and some abuse, and I wasn't able to go outside and walk my dog anymore or go to the grocery store without literally shaking or living in fear. And it was, video games. It was in particular games like Final Fantasy or World of Warcraft or other MMOs, that you can play with other people and feel safe and feel like you're still getting out there in the world, that really helped me build back up like a public trust with strangers. And I it was crazy, Elijah, because I ended up writing the Holder's Dominion and ended up shopping it around, and I got a really lucrative offer for it, and I was really excited because obviously every new writer wants that in, right? They're like, "Ah, this is it." But this was a long time ago. So this was before Wonder Woman was on the screen. This was before, we had a more level-headed idea of the of the dynamic of that there's not just male gamers, right? That there's we're much more aware now of the ratio. That's the word I couldn't think of. The ratio of women and men and gamers. And so the publisher just said, we really want to, we really like the video game aspects, the fantasy aspects of the story. We think we want you to change the protagonist from Kaylee to Ken. And I realized at that moment that I got like a catch in my throat, like thinking, why does that feel, why can I not just say, yes, give me the deal? Like I'll do anything. Right. And I realized that the whole point of writing, Holders was to spotlight a woman in tech and a woman going after this hacker and being involved in video games and being involved in a world that she was exploring and trying to get a hold of. And so I did the hardest thing I've ever done. I literally thought I was committing, career suicide by saying no and politely declining. But I did. I did politely decline. And I said, I just, I have to keep her a female, for and I went another direction. And it was so hard because again, that's like the moment of you just feel like I got to get my foot in the door no matter what. But what's crazy is that by saying no, it opened up other doors where I ended up being on panels about how do you create or write women characters in unique settings or male dominated areas or what have you. And I ended up speaking about women heroes and women protagonists on panels, which ended up me meeting the person who introduced me to Stan Lee and Ben and Roy Pictures, and now I'm now writing novels for them. So like if I hadn't made that such a tough decision, it wouldn't have opened up doors of me literally writing novels for movie companies now. Right?
Oh man, that's such a sweet thing because so many people get kind of bowled over by the need to get on the map that I think, you standing your ground is a testament to, like, you don't always have to say yes to the first offer, even if it seems like it's the best one.
Yeah, exactly. And also like holding to what lit the fire in your belly in the first place to work on something, to write something,
Mhm.
to speak about something, to protest about something, to draw or paint. There's this amazing TED Talk. I'm such a TED Talk geek. I just love TED Talk so much. And there's this amazing one by Simon Sinek where he says, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And when writers or aspiring creatives ask me like when you get stuck or when you are worried about rejection or in those moments of having to say no or what have you, like I always go back to your why, like go back to what made you want to write about this, speak about this, and hold to it, because that there is magic in there. And even if the first, second, third, fourth, fifth publisher or person or production company, publishing company, whether you work in movies or novels or what have you, that just means you're one step closer to finding the right collaborator, right? Like I always
Mhm.
don't think of rejection as, oh, that's a personal, slight to me. Think of it like, oh, I'm one step closer to finding the right partner. So that really helps, I think, audiences when we talk about banding together and remembering your why and your core. But then I also add the caveat that, one of my mentors, Christy Golden, who's an incredible writer, she's written Star Wars books and World of Warcraft books, and she's just amazing. She, mentored me very early on, and she always said, "Janice, I really appreciate that you're one of those authors that isn't so protective and so defensive of your work that it's hard to work with you." She said, "You're really the opposite. You're really amiable and positive, and no matter how much I mark up your manuscripts, it's like you soak it up, you drink it up." And I really think that she hit the nail on the head, because that's how I see collaboration. So yes, I encourage you to say no to big changes, like, if your female protagonist needs to stay a female, that's something for a reason. But if your mentor or your editor is asking you to cut this chapter or cut, this scene or this dialogue, I'm all for that. Like I do want to emphasize the importance of collaboration and being amiable, and knowing that when you do let your work be molded, it's that much tighter, it's that much cleaner, and it's that much better. So I always try to make that distinction. Like it's okay to say no, but also there's I do say yes 90% of the time.
No, I think that's really important, though. I mean, you have a very kind and gentle vibe about you, and that totally fits. Like, you're the kind of person who's going to stand up for something she believes in, but you also understand and encourage other people to understand that you're not always right about the little things, and
Yeah.
I think that is what makes a lot of the best writers successful in the long run, is because they know how to work with people and know when an editor has a sense that, like, this little change is going to make the whole thing that much better, and they
Totally.
don't fight it.
Thank you. Right, that means so much that you could sense that. Thank you. That I totally agree.
So how I got into Omensight in the first place was I saw your panel at, I believe, Wizard World a couple of years ago in
Yay!
Chicago. And so that's what kind of like put the game on my radar. And then I ended up just loving it to death. It was really a great experience. And the question that I had on my mind the entire time that I was playing the game was, how do you get picked up for a job like that?
Yeah.
Like usually in my mind, I think of video game studios as always being a kind of closed cell. So if you think of like Bungie, they have their team of writers for Destiny, but like small studios, I forget that they need to like bring people in because they don't always have a writer on their team. So how did you end up getting plugged in with Spearhead?
Sure, sure, sure. Well, it's interesting, like I love that you make the distinction of, it does feel like I think that entertainment in general can feel like this, walled off fortress with, screenwriting, game writing, authorship, acting, voice acting, like where it's like, how do you get in if you need to be in to be in to get in? Like it's all you need a credit to get the credit, or to, that whole guild circle. And I do like to say that we make the distinction that, it's not an overnight success. And a lot of people assume that, like, they'll hear your panel, or they'll read your book, or they'll see a game that you wrote on, and it's just like assumed like, oh, that you must have done all of that in the last year. Or, we're very like an instant gratification type society, where it's like it just feels like things happen overnight, but it's just not true. And I want to say that up front, because I want people to know that any career in entertainment, it's okay for it to take years, because it usually does. I mean, I could not write full time until 7 years into working on a full time writing career. So 7 years, I had to dedicate to juggling multiple jobs and balancing all that comes with working nights, working weekends, feeling like, is this ever going to go anywhere? Because it's so overwhelming to not just have a 9 to 5 and come home and watch Avengers, or, your play your favorite game or what have you. So, again, I think deciding what is driving you, what's making you excited when you watch the news, or enraged, or when you're talking to family or friends, what's that fire? Narrow that down to the story or the painting or whatever creative outlet you're working on, and then really go for that, right? Really perfect it. Go back to school, hone your craft, and that's what I did. And the book Holder's Dominion, when it was published, it opened up so many doors, not only to, like I said, being on panels and then meeting people that hired me to work on the novels, but then uh, game journalism like MMORPG.com. They asked to interview me about the book, and then that led to asking me, "Hey, we're actually short on columnists. Like, would you be interested in writing columns for us?" And that was a huge opportunity, because just writing columns for MMORPG sent me to things like E3. And what happens at E3? You meet all these different developers, and that's how I ended up meeting Spearhead. Is I actually met them demoing a game they created called Tiny Brains. And I remember, even that year, so long ago, that the team was so amiable, and their spirits were so, like, just really good energy vibes. And I ended up being recommended to Spearhead years later by an incredibly brilliant writer. His name is Chris Avalone, and he said he and I collaborated on like San Diego Comic-Con panels, and always talked about writing with each other and bounce things back and forth. And so when he recommended me, it was like magic, right? I met with Atul and Malik at E3 again years later, and we reminisced about Tiny Brains. And I told them, I know you probably don't remember this, but a long time ago I interviewed you about that game for MMORPG. And with games, with it's so important that you put yourself out there to have these face-to-face interactions or Skype interactions, not just email is what I'm saying, right? Where you can really feel the vibes of each other. How do you collaborate? How do you communicate? What's your style? What is the game's goals, right? And then you speak about what inspires you about the game design goals and what they want for the player, and see if that meshes. It's all kind of like this delicate, I guess collaboration is the best word, but it's really how you jive, right? So that's how Omensight happened, where I joined the writing team. And Nadim Bukira, he was this incredible lead that had me jump in on Twine. We used Twine. We used an incredible wiki that Spearhead had for Omensight. And it was all about, okay, this is where we're at in design, and this is where we want to go. And like you said so kindly earlier, I am all about enabling, like, I wanna help the visionaries, right? Whatever Malik, Atul, Nadeem, and Chris wanted for Omensight, it was like I was there to help, and that was my attitude, and I think that's important when you come in and you think to yourself, "I am part of this machine," and not in a bad way, like, not the, the saying like, "Oh, I'm just a part of, a clog, I'm just a, a part of this big," but in a good way, in a really exciting way that's like you can help springboard an area where a game is stuck or struggling. Like that's how I approached it. And I think that's really important in collaboration with games.
So kind of with that collaboration process, were you kind of telecommuting for that then, since you guys were using Twine, and I believe they're Canada based, right?
Yeah, so Spirit is based in Canada, yeah, and I'm in LA. And so it was, but what's so cool is that it sounds like I'm gushing, but I swear, like, just Spearhead is a very well-oiled machine. They're very good at communication. They're very good at, coming back around and where we all, have a weekly meeting or talk about the next action item or where we left off, where we're going. And so it was very easy. I didn't feel like we were not in the same room. Even though we were working remotely with each other, it felt like we were just a family, like we were a team, and I was right in the room with them. So I never felt like tripped up by that. I always felt very, very welcomed, very part of the team, instantly, up to speed with how everyone felt about how the game was going. What do we need from here? And just what they like when Malik and Atul and Nadeem were talking to me about the characters that they had, already designed, the game elements that were already in place. I was already just sparking with creativity because what they had already done was so intriguing, and like their character Radhika, for example. I just the look, the musical part of it, same thing with Indrik. So just Ludimir, just me hearing about the characters that they had created and what they would like me to do from there with them or bring to the table, I was like, I was in. It just felt like magic. It felt like it was meant to be.
Ended up answering a couple of my questions there, which had wanted to know if you had helped create those characters, but it sounds like they had kind of handed you some drawings and some direction and said, "Hey, no, flesh them out." So, how did you start developing the personalities for those characters?
Yeah, yeah, see, exactly, and it really does depend on when you come in on a game project, right? Like, if you come in super early, before things have been established and game design has been locked or characters have been locked, there's so much blue skying opportunity where the whole team is throwing out ideas and you're trying to hone in on, okay, what do we want the feel for the gamer to be like? What do we want the feel for this zone or for these characters? But yeah, but if you come in later on when things are already foundational, if the foundation's already been met, if some gameplay's already been met, if some design's already been locked, it's actually can be, I won't say more fun because they're both really fun. Whatever way you go, if you come in the beginning or the middle or the end, it's all fun. But it's so different because one thing I like about coming in the middle or toward the end is like the challenge of it, right? Because all of a sudden you as a writer are a puzzle solver. So you take what you're given and you're like, okay, you can't go out of these constraints. So how can we figure out how to make this cool or create this interesting storyline from these restrictions? So it's like, you know what I mean? So both ways are cool. Like, oh, all the freedom and brainstorming is cool, but also the challenge of being like, okay, we have Radhika, we have, this instrument, we have this. What inspires you from that? And for Radhika in particular, when I was marinating on her character and I was trying to think of, okay, how can I what stands out to her? And I realized that drawing from like the animal side of the story, right? That all these different, anthropomorphic animals are in part of the story. I realized that, the rodent part of her, like she would have a big family, right?
Mhm.
And I have a big family. There's 6 kids in my family and I'm 5th out of 6, and I realized I was really inspired to weave some personal details into her story from my story. And even though I wasn't weaving the nice parts of my upbringing, I actually wove in some like some difficult parts,
Mhm.
like some painful parts of having siblings and the pressure and the heartache that comes with all of that. And so it was again, it was kind of cool to think on, okay, what do I have already established? What do I have to work with, and how can I go from there? And I really enjoyed writing about her connection with certain siblings or her insecurities with how she was perceived or what have you. And then her guilt on when she the same thing with me and you, right? We all have these moments of like, oh, I really messed up and I feel guilty that I made this wrong choice here. And so I really try to do that with the characters that I write, where I want you and I to feel like in that moment that the character's going through that, hey, have felt that. We have felt that guilt. We have felt that pressure. And I really like that I could share that with Radhika. And really for Indrik too, because I didn't want him to be just a stagnant emperor that wanted to dictate. I really wanted to show like, hey, he got ripped from his family when he was 6 years old. The pressure of having a mentor that was so hard on him molded him in these ways. And then you have the player, hopefully, in some moments feeling like, wow, what would I do in that situation? Or even like Thanos in Avengers, right? Like having that moment of like, well, he's got a point. I mean, it's terrible, but
Yeah.
it's like so yeah, I have to hand it to Nadim and Atul and Malik and the whole team, the whole design team at Spearhead, Chris Avalone. Like literally, they built so much cool stuff. And then, like you said, I came in and they said, "Hey, can you build a backstory for Ludimir and Radhika and Indrik? And can you weave in what we already have locked and give a reason? Why does she do this? Why does he do that? And tie it all together." It was hard, but it was so fun.
One of my favorite pieces with all of that development is like you had some of those, those character traits and flaws kind of worn on their sleeves, but you also wove those backstories into like little lore snippets. And the thing that's so crazy is that if you don't get those lore snippets, the characters still feel like they've been through some stuff, and so they still feel like they have that depth to them. How did you go about kind of writing all those twists and turns of, the characters' motivations depending on, what they're shown or what they're not shown? And then also accounting for that without, the player needing to find those lore pieces if they don't happen to explore enough to find them.
Right, right. I'm so glad you took the time to find the lore snippets. Those were incredibly challenging to write because they have to be so short, but they have to have such an impact, right? So I think that's probably the hardest thing with game writing is you have to try to get to the emotion, the feeling, that place that you need the character to be at, and hopefully the gamer, but also in such a small amount of time. And so, like with a novel, I'm writing 400 pages and I have this time to build and build and build and build to reveals or turning points or changes of complete personalities or careers for the character. But for games it's like, wow, we have to do that so much more quickly. And the lore snippets are so near and dear to my heart. So thank you for finding them and reading them. And for the other parts, I mean, I have to give credit to Nadim and Malik and Atul and the whole team because they did want from the beginning. They told me we do want this to be twists and turns and playable, replayable in different ways where you can go back and make different decisions and pick different characters at different times and feel like you have this very thriller murder mystery, Sherlock Holmes unraveling to it. And so I certainly have to just stand up and cheers them because it's just so cool working with people that really know like the highlight of the game and where the whole high vision of where they want it, how they want the player to feel. And Nadim also wanted to integrate real life culture into the game, which I thought was really cool. He really wanted to take traditions from different countries and not in a preachy way but just in a very subtle like Easter egg way. He would say, hey, let's try to integrate this political type of feeling that originates from this country into this part of the quest line. I really like that. I like that. And then Chris Avellone, he came in after Nadim and Atul and Malik and I worked really closely together, and he was so brilliant in highlighting foundations that we had built and emphasizing them even more and being like, oh, well, why don't you run with that here, and we can even get to, this character setup even more, or this dynamic type of dialogue even more. So it was a very evolutionary process where it was like, okay, Genese, we know we want lore snippets, so can you work on those? And then, okay, we know we want this to be replayable or to be able to change the decision on this, so let's make this quest line with a twist, or with if you make this decision, let's change it. So it happened over time, right? But it was all streamlined with the end goal of, let's make this real life impactful, where you can kind of feel, like you said, the characters have more to the story, even if you don't pick up all of the lore snippets. But if you do, you can really feel that they're doing something with a very deep motivation and consequence, which is my big thing. I really like the consequences of, well, if Radica hadn't played that song, or if the avalanche hadn't happened, like, I really like that idea. Or like with her brother being, well, I shouldn't give everything away, but you go play the game.
Yeah,
Anybody that's listening, you play Omensight, and then we'll talk.
it's honestly really good. The story is honestly one of the better like murder mystery stories that I've played, and it unravels in such an interesting way. There was never a point where I'm like, oh, that was predictable. Like everything that happened was just a pleasant surprise, one after another.
Hey, oh, thank you. I'm just smiling from ear to ear.
What did you think about, so the definitive edition added kind of a happy ending, and having witnessed the happy ending, it almost made me understand the original ending better. So do you have any insight to why the original ending was picked, the more somber ending that left people kind of broken, versus the happy ending on the definitive edition?
Yeah, this is a hard one because entertainment is so subjective, right? I mean, it's so hard to really feel, to know how would you want to feel after completing a game, and after watching a movie, after, reading a novel. They all are so personal because they take us on these journeys as we play it or read it or watch it, and we know how we want it to end, or how it feels to put ourselves in the character's shoes. And sadly, like, real life is is challenging. I mean, like we said earlier in the interview, like, we have all probably been through some really messed up, situations, when whatever, school, family, work. And I personally like the movies and books and games that highlight that, because it reminds me that I'm not alone in the world when things go wrong, and I feel like there's no end in sight, or I don't have enough money for rent, or I don't have, the friend, the friend never responded, or the family member shunned you, or at the workplace you just got completely scolded in public, and you're just, you never want to go back. Like, there's all these situations where that just really rake us over the coals, and I do feel like it's nice and it's refreshing when games or when forms of entertainment can show, like, I love how you worded it, like these somber or broken or difficult endings, because in a way it's like, hey, like, we're in this together. Like, all we have is each other. Like, let's find those people, those circles that can be there for us, whether, it's family or not. Like, I love the idea of Friendsgiving, right? Like Thanksgiving, like it's November and Thanksgiving's coming up. And I personally don't have, family close in LA. Like, the closest I have are cousins in San Diego, but everyone else is in Texas or New Mexico or Florida or what have you. And so there is this feeling, like this isolated, very lonely, depressing feeling. So I really like it when games can be like, hey, we're in this together, and it's real life, but it's not, it doesn't mean you're alone. We can all share, right, our difficulties. But then what's nice about entertainment is it's like an escape. So I think the option of having, like, the happier storyline are for those moments where we do just want to escape, right? We want to put on a comedy, a stand up on Netflix or whatever we're watching, or we do want to hop into a video game that is relaxing and fun, or we want to read a novel that's uplifting, like, because it's that escape feeling. It's that, okay, I can unwind. I've just gotten done with work. I don't have to think. I can just enjoy. So it's a catch 22, if that makes sense, where I really appreciate when movies like Memento go there, right?
Mhm.
And it's like can really be moving and like be dark or be not what you expected, but then also can provide like, wow, in Lord of the Rings, like they defeated the art, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
they won. Like, yeah, I love that moment, right? When Aragorn is like at the, the river. I'm gonna get it all wrong. So everybody, I'm gonna get the lore wrong. But when he's there and like they are like, what are you three gonna do? And then they have the whole, this whole ghost army that just comes and annihilates them. It's like that feeling of like, yes, like, you take that, we did it, and all that stuff. But it's just, yeah, that's a hard one for sure.
Yeah.
But I hope I answered it.
No, yeah, for sure. I think at the end of the day, the original ending is a testament to the work that you and the design team did to really make the characters feel real, especially as anthropomorphic characters. I without spoiling the ending, I was so like distraught at how it ended, not because it ended poorly, but just was just pining for someone to have, an out, and no one could get it because the logically the way that the whole thing works out is, the harbinger solves a mystery, and none of the better things, the revelations that came to the characters and the other branching parts of the story could happen. And so
Right.
I it's really a testament to writing ability, especially yours, to create such deep characters and to basically give each of them that epiphany payoff right before you have to yank the carpet out from under them. It was brilliant. It was just really brilliant. I want everyone who hasn't played it to definitely pick it up. It's out on Switch now. I know there's a lot of Switch owners, and pick it up on Steam on the cheap sometime. It's a really great game if you're looking for something that's narratively solid and relatively easy to play. It's definitely like new gamer friendly.
Thank you so much for I know I'm biased in saying this, but I totally agree. Like I think it's so fun to play. The mechanics, the look, the art, the colors, the I can't give enough credit to the team, the designers, the creators, the visionaries, the leaders, the programmers. Like I just they really again, I've always felt so welcomed by the whole team, and we work really they just really well communication wise, positivity wise. And I really appreciate that you picked up on the nuances of the work that went into it. It means so much, Elijah, because so much of game, like so much of the moments where you're everybody is working so hard for this goal of a dream, that to have it come out and have someone like you be able to say that it spoke to you in such an in-depth and profound way is truly incredible. It's just thank you so much, because we all put every part of the pipeline and games put so much heart into it, and that doesn't get reported enough in game journalism, that there's so much heart and passion that come from every single part of the pipeline in game making, that I wish it could be highlighted.
Well, I'm glad that I could do that for you today. As a fellow English major, I've spent a lot of time reading a lot of books and writing a lot of analysis papers, and so I try to take the time when I'm encountering media that starts to speak to me, that I really like dig in and pay attention, because I don't
Yay.
just want to be an average consumer all the time. Sometimes it's nice. Like, it's nice to just go watch a Marvel
Yeah.
movie and turn off and be like, that was cool. Um,
Totally.
not that's only what they're for, but they're definitely designed to be entertaining. And then there's moments where you sit down with Omensight and you're like, oh, this is kind of a fun hack and slash, and it turns out to be this like really profound murder mystery story with a lot of complicated character motivations and factions, and it was just something I totally did not expect for, a game that was $14.99 at the time that I picked it up. So
Oh, good, good. Oh, everybody that's listening, please go get Omensight. I'm so happy to hear that. And wish list all of Spearhead Games.
yes, definitely. There's a game that's similar that came out right before. I don't do you remember what it's called? It's the one with the fox character.
Oh, you're gonna put me on the spot and I get nervous and then I
No, it's
blush
okay.
and then I don't forget.
Anyway,
I mean, I do forget. See?
that's fine.
Tongue
There's
twisted.
another game that came out right before Omensight that has a similar kind of redo structure. It's really cool. Definitely
Oh,
check that one out
awesome.
too. It's more of a piratey kind of story. So if you like swashbuckling adventures, that one will definitely be for you. I'll leave the title of the game in the show notes. But I want to give you a chance to plug yourself where people can find you if you have, a blog or any content that you put out.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very kind. People say that they're like, "Oh, you're totally extroverted." But what's funny is I'm a practice extrovert, but on the inside, I'm just as bashful as any introvert that you would meet. I'm just very practiced at it. And at this point, I've done so many panels that I have finally gotten over, all my public speaking fears. Well, I still get little butterflies and all of that, but you can absolutely find me, at conventions. I do travel a lot for conventions. Like I'm always at San Diego Comic-Con or local conventions, but then I also do panels for conventions all over the country. I've done them for Chicago and Philadelphia and Austin, and so I will probably be at a city near you soon for all of your listeners. And if not, I'm at genesedavis.com, and my name is super unique. It's spelled with a G. It sounds kind of like a J. It sounds like Denise, but it's Genese. So you can find me there. I am on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. My fans say I don't post enough, so I apologize. I don't post enough. I admit it. I try. But yeah, I would love for everybody to keep a lookout for Project Nitron. Those are the novels I'm writing for Stan Lee and Benaroya Pictures. I'm writing novelettes for other movie companies that are coming out next year. I'm working on a really cool game called Ari and the Secret of Seasons.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so yeah, keep a lookout. I'll try to post more efficiently. And I also have a podcast that I have. It's called Storyteller Chatcast, and that's also on my website, so you can check that out as well. And I think that's me. I think that's everything. Happy holidays. I mean, holidays are coming up.
Yeah, it's that time of the year, and it's snow on the ground for some. Otherwise, it's just cooling off, and it's a good time to kind of curl up and start listening to your long form content, your podcasts, your long YouTube analysis videos, and reading some books.
Yeah,
So
see, I wish I had the snow you're talking about. LA is so sunny, but I want to curl up a fireplace and go outside and read another book. That sounds amazing. But honestly, though, thank you so much
Oh,
for having
thank
me.
you
And
for being here. It's been a pleasure to talk to you again. I mean, we talked so briefly at Comic Con, a couple of years ago. But I just remembered how nice and kind you were. So it's nice to see that carries through even on the more private airwaves. So thank you
oh,
so much.
my pleasure. I'm honored, and I'm so happy that we got to talk about Spearhead Games because they really are honestly an incredible game company, incredible team.
Yeah, they're so good. And thank you for lending me your voice today. And for all of you listening, please check out Holder's Dominion and all of Janice's other projects, as well as my other episodes. And we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Interview. If you would like to support this podcast, please subscribe for more episodes and leave us a rating in iTunes. If you would like to further support us, please consider donating at the links in the episode description. Interview is a Victory or Death Media production.